السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أو إن كانت المخالفة بتقديم أو تأخير. In some نسخة it comes with the word وتأخير، أي في الأسماء كمرة بن كعب وكعب بن مرة، لأن اسم أحدهما اسم بالآخر فهذا هو المقلوب. وللخطيب فيه كتاب رافع الارتياب. وقد يقع الكلب في المتن أيضا كحديث أبي هريرة عند مسلم في السبعة الذين يظلهم الله في عرشه فيه، ورجل تصدق بصدقة نخفاها حتى لا تعلم يمينه ما تنفق شماله، فهذا ممن قلب على أحد الرواة، وإنما هو حتى لا تعلم شماله ما تنفق يمينه كما في الصحيحين. Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned above that sometimes mukhalafa takes place when there are external words which are inserted in the text, and that was what the whole chapter of Mudraj was all about. So now he discusses another way in which mukhalafa takes place. So we're still under the same point, under thumma al-mukhalafa wa hiya al-qism al-sabi'. We're still under the qism al-sabi', a different way in which mukhalafa takes place. So this leads us to the chapter of Maqlūb, and in this chapter there is no addition or subtraction from the narration. All the narrators are there in the chain, all the words are quoted, but there is altering and mixing up. So looking at this word maqlūb, linguistically, qalb means to change, to swap, to turn around, to turn away, to convert, to mix up. So Shaykh Khuzair, he says, لغة اسم مفعول من القلب، تقول قلبته قلبا من باب ضرب حولته على وجهه. So this is the meaning. وكلام مقلوب مصروف عن وجهه. And he gives them example from the Quran in Surah Tawbah, وقلبوا لك الأمور. فالمقلوب المصروف عن وجهه. But besides that, it also comes in the meaning of that which is original and unadulterated. So Ibn Faris, rahmallah, he mentioned this in Mu'jam Maqayis al-Lugha, that some of the meanings of qalb is يدل على خالص شيء وشريفه, and then the other meaning is where you swap something around. And this is the reason why a heart is called a qalb, because it is like the most original and the greatest organ which a person has, or because of the different emotions and the different feelings and the different states which a person's heart goes through. So this here is with regards to the lugwi meaning, that you can see it means to change, to swap, to turn around. Technically, it is difficult to give a very precise and a very accurate meaning, because scholars use this in so many different contexts, in different ways, that it is impossible to give it, to define it precisely. Inshallah, if there's time, then I will try to show you some of the various ways in which scholars use the term. And that is the reason, you remember when you were doing Muqaddamah ibn Salah, Allama ibn Salah rahmallah, he did not give the definition. He merely gave two examples there, and all of that is being discussed under chapter 169. But the point to keep in mind here, when comparing it with Muqaddamah ibn Salah, is that Ibn Hajar rahmallah gives a different meaning for maqlūb compared to what Ibn Salah, and because of Ibn Salah, then the commentators and all those who worked on his Muqaddamah, so that means all the scholars before Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned. But now, in spite of there being so many different ways to in which the scholars use the term and being so difficult to define it, Ibn Hajar rahmallah gives a very concise definition. He just says, أو إن كانت المخالفة بتقديم أو تأخير فهذا هو المقلوب. That if there is some mix-up, some words are mentioned in there's a change of the words, some words are mentioned in the beginning, some words are mentioned in the end, or even with the names of the narrators, if there is some mix-up, then this here is what is called maqlūb. So this might be a jami' meaning, it might be comprehensive enough to compare, to incorporate most of the ways in which the term was used for, but it is definitely not mani', because it has so many other ways as well. So here, this is how he gave the definition, just with a few words in a nukhbah. But when you go to his nukat, he gives a definition in more detail, but then it's very different. So it's in more detail, but it's completely different from what he mentions here. In his nukat, he says, وَحَقِيقَتُهُ إبدال ما يعرف برواية بغيره فيدخل فيه إبدال راو أو أكثر من راو حتى الإسناد كله. So you can see that the definition which is given there is where you swap a narrator with another narrator. That's the meaning which he mentioned there. But here, or maybe حتى الإسناد كله, you can even swap the entire chain. But here he's just mentioning that you are mixing up a few, you're mixing up the names of the narrators. So you can already from here get an idea on the different ways that the scholars use the term. Now if you look in the footnotes, you see Sheikh Nuruddin rahimahullah, he offered the following definition, that al-Maqlūb هو الحديث الذي أبدل فيه راويه شيئا بآخر في السند أو المتن سهوا أو عمدا. So this definition also, it's not, it doesn't incorporate all the different ways in which the word was used. And then he's using the word here sahwan or amadan, but other scholars, they were very strict to say that it can only be considered as maqlūb if it was done unintentionally, if it was done mistakenly. Like Allama Munawi rahmallah, he says that قال بعض من لقيناه وسيجيء قريبا ما يشير إلى أن شرطه أن يقع غلطا, that when it takes place by mistake, then you can consider it as maqlūb if it is done done unintentionally. Because if it was done intentionally and then also for no valid reason, then it will be mawdū'. Now where we say for no valid reason, if you turn the page, if you go on to page 96, now again, there's other chapters which come here in between, Al-Mazid fi Muttasil al-Asanid and Mustarid, but then you can see, so all these are like linked. So then he says, وَقَدْ يَقَعُ الْإِبْدَالِ عَمْدًا لِمَنْ يُرَادُ اخْتِبَارُ حِفْظِهِ امْتِحَانًا مِنْ فَاعِلِهِ كَمَا وَقَعَ لِلْبُخَارِ وَالْعُقَيْلِ. That sometimes they would change around just to see the status of the memory of a narrator. So that is why we say that it's done intentionally, but for no valid reason. Because some scholars would do it intentionally just to test. Likewise, Allama al-Laqani, rahmallah, he also mentioned in the closing words of this chapter, the last words of this chapter, Tatimma, صرح بعض المشايخ بأن شرط هذا النوع ألا يقع عمدا كما يؤخذ مما يأتي للمصنف والله أعلم. So he's saying that there are many mashayikh who very clearly and very emphatically mentioned that it should not be done intentionally, because if it is done intentionally, then it goes under the chapter of mawdū'. Now it is no more considered as maqlūb. Remember, mawdū' is there, the worst of the worst, the lowest of the low. So it has to go there, it goes in the gutters, and then that whole, it's not even considered as a hadith to begin with. So it has absolutely no value. And that is why you see that Ibn al-Hanbali rahmallah, he just added one additional word here, and then this meaning is conveyed. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ بِتَقْدِيمٍ أَوْ تَأْخِيرٍ وَهْمًا. So you can see, he says wahman, that if it is done like this here, unintentionally. So, although all these definitions which Sheikh Nuruddin gave, and which Sheikh Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave in Nukat, it's not all encompassing, but it does give you an idea of the predominant way in which the word maqlūb was used. So in Nukhba he said, أو بتقديم أو تأخير فالمقلوب. That is what he said, that if it is done where by bringing some words forward or some words delaying it and mentioning it later, meaning mixing up the words, then that is considered as maqlūb. That's what he mentioned in Nukhba. But now to explain it, how it was changed, he says أي في الأسماء. So he's mentioning the names were changed. Now is this here احترازي or اتفاقي? That means it can only be when there's a change in names, then it's considered as mawdū', or then it's considered as maqlūb, or even if the narrators are changed. So Sheikh Wajiuddin al-Gujarati, he says that قيد به لما أنه يكون غالبا في الإسناد. The meaning why he mentioned في الأسماء is because most of the time this is how it takes place in the sanad. And we will discuss now whether if narrators are swapped around, then it can be considered as maqlūb or not. We will mention what other scholars have said. So you can see now he gives the example. He says, كَمُرَّةَ بْنِ كَعْبٍ وَكَعْبِ بْنِ مُرَّةٍ. This is how he is mentioning it. Is that there is a difference. Someone is saying that it's Murrah bin Ka'b, and another person is saying that it's Ka'b ibn Murrah. Likewise, some is saying that it's Muslim ibn al-Walid, and others are saying that it's Walid ibn Muslim. Some are saying it's Aswad bin Yazid, and others are saying it's Yazid ibn al-Aswad. Now, from this examples which he is given, the thing comes about that does he intend here that there must be one person and they just differing on the names. So that means one person came, like say you got your surname, they come and they take your surname and they mention your surname first and then your name, or they take your father's name and mention it. So they're swapping around one narrator. So in this example, كَمُرَّةَ بْنِ كَعْبٍ وَكَعْبِ بْنِ مُرَّةٍ. Does he mean that one is saying that actually another narrator has narrated it, that it's Ka'b ibn Murrah who's a second person, and another is saying no, it's Murrah ibn Ka'b who's a totally different person? Is that the meaning? Or is the meaning that it's one person, everyone is agreeing that it's one person, but he's just making now a mistake in the way that he is narrating? So we will explain that. So this is the meaning which Shaykh Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave here. Allama Qurani rahmallah, like we said, there are so many different ways that the word maqlūb was used. So even though Ibn Hajar rahmallah only mentioned this here, Allama Qurani said qismun min aqsamihi, that this here is just one of the various ways in which the term was used. Now another way is where you are changing the position of the two names, and then you also change some letters in the name. This is what Allama al-Qani says. He says, وَرُبَّمَا وَقَعَ مع ذلك تقديم وتأخير في بعض حروف الاسم المشتبه كأيوب بن سيار ويسار بن أيوب. So you can see Yasar and Sayar. So the sin is first and there the Ya is first. So even they're using the word maqlūb. Likewise, Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, now this is linked to the definition which we quoted from Nukat, that he mentions walil maqlūbi aqsāmun ukhar, that there are various other ways in which maqlūb is used, and he mentioned that some of them are put in different chapters. And Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned some of them and he didn't mention. So now he gives another example here. And he says, وَهُوَ أَيَّكُونَ الْحَدِيثُ مَشْهُورًا بِرَاوٍ, and this is from Ibn Salah. فَيَجْعَلُ مَكَانَهُ رَاوٍ آخَرْ فِي طَبَقَتِهِ لِيَصِيرَ بِذَلِكَ غَرِيبًا مَرْغُوبًا فِيهِ. That you are taking the name of one narrator out, and you are putting a totally different narrator in that place, so that everyone has the narration between this particular sanad, and this narrator is the only one who has it from a different narrator in that sanad. So he says, كَحَدِيثٍ مَشْهُورٍ بِسَالِمٍ, that the narration, everybody knows it goes Salim an-Nafi' an Ibn Umar. But now a person comes, he takes away the name Salim, and he's swapping it and he's putting the name Nafi'. So here he's changing the person. And likewise he says that many وَطَاعُونَ would do this, Hamad ibn Amr al-Nasibi, wa Ismail ibn Abi Hayya, wa Bahlul ibn Ubayd al-Kindi. All of them would do this. So this is what Allama ibn Salah rahmallah indicated. You know, when we brought the chapter of Maqlūb, which we done on page 101, وَهُوَ نَحْوُ حَدِيثٍ مَشْهُورٍ عَنْ سَالِمٍ جَعَلَ عَنْ نَافِعٍ لِيَصِيرَ بِذَلِكَ غَرِيبًا مَرْغُوبًا بِهِ, that you are swapping out the name totally. So you are changing the narrator. But Ibn Hajar rahmallah brought that under the section of Mawdu'. So you can see Ibn Hajar rahmallah is amending the chapter of Ibn Salah rahimahullah. And most of those who worked on the kitab of Ibn Salah and many of the commentators, they obviously followed Ibn Salah rahmallah. His own teacher, Allama Iraqi rahmallah, he also followed Ibn Salah rahimahullah. But now, what Ibn Hajar rahmallah had in mind, that he's seeing that there are so many different types under maqlūb, that we just mentioned that there are so many different scenarios. So he's trying to minimize what will fall under maqlūb. So he's dividing it and is categorizing it differently. He's putting some into the chapter of mawdu'. Likewise, he's adding some into the chapter of muttarib. You'll see there in the bottom of this page here. Then sometimes the entire chain is swapped for another chain. So, like Al-Imam Munawi rahimahullah said, يُؤْخَذَ إِسْنَادُ مَتْنٍ فَيُجْعَلَ عَلَى مَتْنٍ آخَرْ أَوْ بِالْعَكْسِ. That sometimes you take the entire sanad and you change it. A sanad of another hadith, you bring it and you quote another hadith with that sanad. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is putting all of this under different chapters. So in short, he did not just blindly follow those who came before him, but you can see he refined their terminologies, he regrouped all of these categories, and this is something which you should take note of. Al-Malaqani rahimahullah, he says here, فَعَلَيْكَ بِالرُّسُوخِ فِي هَذَا الْمَحَلِ وَلَا تَخْرُجْ عَمَّا هَدَاكَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ مِنَ الْبَيَانِ إِلَّا بِبُرْهَانِ الْعِيَانِ فَقَدْ كَثُرَ فِي هَذَا الْمَحَلَ الْهَذِيَانِ. So he's mentioned وَزَلَّتْ فِيهِ الْأَعْيَانِ. So it's something which you should keep in mind and take note of, that what others have added under the chapter of Maqlūb, Ibn Hajar rahmallah added it under different chapters. Now I told you about earlier scholars, so they used using the word qalb or maqlūb. So they would use the word qalaba in the literal sense as well. Is that you see when the name is completely changed, so it's one person but the entire name is changed, then too they would use the word qalb. Like in Du'afa, Alama Uqayli rahimahullah, you remember that narrator Muhammad bin Sa'id al-Maslūb, the same guy who said that it's fine to lie. So under his tarjuma, Alama Uqayli rahimahullah said, وَهُمْ يُغَيِّرُونَ اسْمَهُ إِذَا حَدَّثُوا عَنْهُ. That they change his name completely. Now look how he changes it. He says, فَمَرْوَانُ الْفَزَارِ يَقول محمد بن حسان. Sometimes he will say Muhammad ibn Hisan. وَيَقول أيضا محمد بن أبي قيس. So it's completely different. Where's Hisan and Abu Qais? وَيَقول محمد بن أبي زينب. So you can see now it's completely changed again. Then Muhammad ibn Abi Zakaria, Muhammad ibn Abi al-Hasan. So you can see how it's changed, completely different. Then he quotes from Ibn Ajlan and Abdurrahman ibn Sulaiman. They would say Muhammad ibn Sa'id ibn Hasan ibn Qais. وبعضهم يقول, others would say Abu Abdul Rahman. Now you can see it's completely changed. But the point which we want to come to is that he says, وَقَدْ بَلَغَنِي عَنْ بَعْضِ أَصْحَابِ الْحَدِيثِ أَنَّهُ كَانَ يُقَلِّبُ اسْمَهُ عَلَى نَحْوِ 100 اسم. So he's using the word qalb, يُقَلِّبُ اسْمَهُ, that he would change his name into 100 different ways. Although after that, Al-Mawqali says, وَمَا أَبْعَدَ يَكُونَ كَمَا قَالَ. But the point to show is that even when a name is completely changed, so there's no taqdeem and ta'khir, it's completely changed. Then too they would use the word qalb. Like another example in Tahzib al-Kamal, you know, Abdurrahman ibn Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman ibn Abi Sa'sa al-Ansari. So with regards to him, it says, وَمِنُ مَن يَقُولُ فِي Abdurrahman ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Sa'sa. So some would say it like this. Others would say Abdurrahman ibn Abi Sa'sa. Others would say Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman ibn Abi Sa'sa. Thereafter it comes فَيُقَلِّبُ اسْمَهُ وَالْجَمِيعُ لِرَجُلٍ وَاحِدٍ. So changing the name entirely, completely. Then too they would use the word maqlūb. So now coming back to this text here, you can see that how Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning it, that there is just something, a mix-up in the names Murrah ibn Ka'b and Ka'b ibn Murrah, and thereafter he doesn't mention any other restrictions. He doesn't mention that the two have to be from the same era, they have to be from the same tabaqa, or they have to be from the same region, or have similar teachers. So that means even if the one, like Murrah ibn Ka'b is from a completely different era, and Ka'b ibn Murrah is from a totally different time. So that means an average muhaddith would realize that there is a mix-up going on here. That is what is considered as maqlūb, and I will show you now how come that is the meaning which Ibn Hajar rahmallah intends. So now he says that Walil Khatib fi kitab Rafi' al-Irtiyab, that Alama Khatib rahmallah has the kitab Rafi' al-Irtiyab. The full name of the book is Rafi' al-Irtiyab fil Maqlūb fil Asma'i wal Ansab. So this book is not published, but the manuscript is in an Egyptian library. If any of you are interested, you can get the manuscript. So now Ibn Hajar rahmallah is citing this book as a reference for maqlūb. He just mentioned that if there's taqdeem and ta'khir in a name, then it's called maqlūb. And Alama Khatib has a book with regards to that which is called Rafi' al-Irtiyab. But and we're saying that it's a manuscript, so I don't have a copy, so I never went through it. But now when we see that Allama ibn Salah, rahimahullah, he mentioned this exact same book, but now he's talking about it dealing with something else that he's brought. So we done the chapter of Maqlūb already. But on page 368, he says, an-Naw'u as-Sadis wal-Khamsun, the 58th chapter. There he is talking of معرفة الرواة المتشابهين في الاسم والنسب المتمايزين بالتقديم والتأخير في الابن أو الأب. So there he is mentioning it. Can you see? He brought the chapter of Maqlūb separately, and he brought this chapter separately, where you have two people. One person, his name is the father's name of another narrator, and his father's name is the name of this particular narrator. So when it's two narrators like this here, Murrah ibn Ka'b and Ka'b ibn Murrah, it's a completely different chapter. So it is there where Ibn Salah rahmallah mentions that Allama Khatib rahmallah wrote. Now for us here, so if you got the same print like me, you will, if you turn to page 133, so if you don't have the same print like me, then you just turn to, you will see at the end is Khatima. So right before the Khatima, you turn there, you'll see Shaykh Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions there that أو يحصل الاتفاق في الخط والنطق لكن يحصل الاختلاف أو الاشتباه بالتقديم والتأخير إما في الاسمين جملة أو نحو ذلك كأن يقع التقديم والتأخير في الاسم الواحد في بعض حروفه بالنسبة إلى ما يشتبه به. Now there he is saying مثال الأول الأسود بن يزيد ويزيد بن الأسود وهو الظاهر وعبد الله بن يزيد ويزيد بن عبد الله. So there he is discussing all of this here. That when you have, you can see Aswad ibn Yazid and Yazid ibn Aswad, they are two different people. So Aswad is the name of this narrator, but there is the name of the father. And here the name of the father is Yazid, and there it's the name of the narrator. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah is discussing that separately. He's not discussing that. That means his intent here of saying Kamurrat ibn Ka'b ibn Murrah, his intent is to show that a person made a clear mix-up, where for one person he is using different names. He's swapping it around. Instead of saying Ka'b ibn Murrah, he's saying Murrah ibn Ka'b. So you can see, because the proof of it is that what he brought on page 133, the words which he brought just before the Khatima. And Ibn Salah rahmallah, they are referring to that, and then they say that Allama Khatib rahmallah actually wrote on that. So Allama Khatib rahmallah actually wrote for what Ibn Hajar mentioned on page 133. He's saying وَصَنَّفَ الْخَطِيبُ الْحَافِظ في هذا النوع كتابا سماه رافع الارتياح في المقلوب من الأسماء والأنساب وهذا الاسم ربما. So you can see Ibn Salah rahmallah is mentioning that it's actually pertaining to that. It's not pertaining to this here. Otherwise, Ibn Hajar would have mentioned all of that. He would have mentioned it here. But you can see he's creating this distinction. And then Ibn Hajar rahmallah, he has a kitab which is called Jalal al-Qulub fi ma'rifatil Maqlūb, Nuzhatul Qulub. But that kitab also is not printed. So all this here is when it is in the sanad. Now he goes on and he explains that وَقَدْ يَقَعُ الْقَلْبُ فِي الْمَتْنِ, that sometimes there can be a mix-up in words in the text of the narration. So Ibn al-Hanbali rahmallah in Qafwa al-Athar, he said وَهُوَ قَلِيل, that very seldom this takes place. And by Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioning it separately like this here, you can already understand that there is a reason. That he said بِتَقْدِيمٍ أَوْ تَأْخِيرٍ, he just mentioned fil asma. He could have mentioned أو fil alfaz. He could have mentioned it all for his definition to be all inclusive. But he brought this here separately, and then he brings the word qad, and you know qad also comes for taqleel. So this here shows already the way Ibn Hajar mentioned it, that it happens very few times in the matn. So Al-Malaqani rahmallah said وَفِيهِ إِشَارَةٌ إِلَىٰ قِلَّتِهِ, that just the way Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned all of this here, it already indicates that this here happens very few times, it happens very little. And Allama al-Qurani rahmallah, he explained that why it's very seldom that it takes place in the text. He says إِنَّمَا جُعْلَ الْقَلْبُ فِي الْأَسْمَاءِ أَصْلًا لِأَنَّهُ بِصَدَدِ بَيَانِ الطَّعْنِ فِي الرَّاوِي. So that is why he's saying that it's more in the names compared to the text. Now, although he mentions that this here takes place so seldom, Alama Wajiuddin, he says that some latter-day scholars, they dedicated the word munqalib for this year. So that means when you have words which are swapped around, then they would not use the word maqlūb, they would use the word munqalib. It says, وَجَعَلَهُ بَعْضُ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ نَوْعًا مُسْتَقِلًّا سَمَّاهُ الْمُنْقَلِبِ. But thereafter he says, وَأَمْثِلَتُهُ قَلِيلًا. There are very few examples like this. But this here now contradicts what Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim said, because in his commentary he said, وَهُوَ كَثِيرُ الْوُقُوعِ. They were all saying that it happened very few, there's so little examples of it. But Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim says that it happens a lot. And we will explain why this difference came about. But now Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, he gives an example, and he says, كَحَدِيثِ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ عِنْدَ مُسْلِمْ فِي السَّبْعَةِ الَّذِينَ يُضِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي عَرْشِهِ. So the famous narration which comes, it comes in Sahih al-Bukhari. We'll come back to the sanad in Sahih Muslim that سَبْعَةٌ يُضِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظِلِّهِ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلُّهُ الْإِمَامُ الْعَادِلُ وَشَابٌ نَشَأَ فِي عِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ. Then at the end, it comes وَرَجُلٌ تَصَدَّقَ أَخْفَى حَتَّى لَا تَعْلَمْ شِمَالُهُ مَا تُنْفِقُ يَمِينُهُ. Different wording, but basically the same, it's all mentioned in this way here. And then in Sahih Muslim, the words are changed. That it comes حَتَّى لَا تَعْلَمْ يَمِينُهُ مَا تُنْفِقُ شِمَالُهُ. So you can see it's, the words are completely changed. They come to the right hand is spending, and the left hand does not know. And here in this one narration of Sahih Muslim, because remember Imam Muslim rahmallah brought other chains as well, and in those other chains it is narrated correctly, and that is why Kamal ibn Abi Sharif he says, وَعِنْدَهُ عَنْ غَيْرِهِ عَلَى الْأَصْلِ, that others have narrated it properly, and Imam Muslim did bring those other chains and brought the narration correctly. Therefore he says that Ibn Hajar rahmallah, instead of saying كَحَدِيثِ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ عِنْدَ Muslim, he should say فِي بَعْضِ طُرُقِ Muslim لَكَانَ أَوْضَحَ. It is said, في بعض طرق Muslim, it would have been more clear. And you can see Ibn Hajar rahmallah himself, at the end here he says, كما في الصحيحين. And in Bukhari and in Muslim it comes correctly as well. So now here when you're talking about the right hand spending and the left hand, so Mullah al-Qari gives a small commentary here. He says, على إرادة غاية المبالغة في الإخفاء أو المراد به من على شماله بذكر المحل وإرادة الحال تجوزا كقوله تعالى تجري من تحتها الأنهار. So you can see, but he says that إذ المعلوم من السنة إضافة الإعطاء إلى اليمنى. So commenting on this here, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, فهذا ممن قلب على أحد الرواة. That this here, it has been mixed up for one of the narrators. One of the narrators mixed it up. Now, who is that narrator? So when you go through Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, if you look at the sanad, it's only the teachers who are different. After the teachers, the remaining is the same. So Imam Muslim said, حدثني زهير بن حرب ومحمد بن المثنى. So he takes the name of two teachers, but then he says both of them narrated from Yahya al-Qattan. Imam Bukhari rahmallah said, حدثني محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا يحيى. So it's only the teacher who is different. But here you can see Imam Muslim is taking the name of two teachers. So now for two teachers to make the same mistake, it's highly unlikely, especially, it wouldn't make sense. So therefore some have said that it's actually the person, it's either Imam Muslim rahmallah who made the mistake, and there's a discussion on the manuscripts, etc. Or some of them have felt that there's the person who transmitted Sahih Muslim. So the narrator of Sahih Muslim, the student of Sahih Muslim, of Imam Muslim, he is the one who made the mistake. So Qadi Iyaz, he mentions this here, that it's the person who transmitted. So that means in Imam Muslim's life, when Imam Muslim rahmallah wrote it, Imam Muslim rahmallah wrote it correctly, and from Imam Muslim until Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was always mentioned correctly. Only after Imam Muslim rahmallah, it became incorrect. But now, scholars now will actually debate that whether words are maqlūb and hence they have to be rejected, or whether those words could be explained. And that is why I told you that Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim is saying that it happens often, but other scholars are saying that it happens very seldom, because many times when you go through the commentaries of Ḥadīth, you will find explanations. So for example, you look, Imam Munawi gives one example here of the adhan between Ibn Maktoum and Bilal radiallahu anh. When you go through, even from Fath al-Bari, you go through various books of commentaries, you will find that they give different interpretations. Maybe it will refer to different times, maybe it referred to different years even. So they gave those kind of different, even actually in this example here, which Ibn Hajar rahmallah gave, some have even tried to give an interpretation here and to say, no, maybe it was transmitted with this. You remember in Nukat, Ibn Hajar said, لكن حمل بعضهم هذا على ما إذا كان الإنفاق باليمين يستلزم إظهار الصدقة والإنفاق بالشمال يستلزم إخفاؤها فإن الإنفاق بالشمال والحالة هذه يكون أفضل من الإنفاق باليمين. So therefore, they try to give interpretation, and this is where the difference between Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim and the others are. Now the point to conclude what is, how we said with regards to matruk and munkar and mu'allal, how they all were used interchangeably. So the same applies here with maqlūb. So maqlūb also falls under shadh and mu'allal, because the one narrator who's making this mix-up, it is waham. So therefore, it could also then fall under the chapter of mu'allal. In Ibn Hajar mentioned, but كل مقلوب لا يخرج عن كونه معللا أو شاذا. That sometimes for maqlūb you can even use the word mu'allal and you can use the word shadh. And like we said, that there are many different ways in which scholars use the word maqlūb. Inshallah, we'll continue on until then. Jazakumullah khairan.